Okay, well, I got a bunch of slides on the screen. I hope you guys can see them because that's where a lot of the information is. Like the kid says, off frigate, let's get started. I want to talk about three things, basically. I was telling Don, I think this is kind of I've given some of these talks before, and this is kind of a blend of them, and I tried to make it so that I can, John said that the hook comes out and takes me off stage in, what, 40 minutes or something like that? Okay, I want to talk about what is a modern RC sailplane, because some people really don't know. What types of soaring and contests are we involved in, and how to fly a sailplane, some real basic stuff. So basic that a lot of us don't remember it and don't do it. So John asked this question, who are you? And it's about, have you flown before? So I picked up, there's a bunch of guys who haven't, or have part. And going with that is the question, have you ever been to a sailplane contest like at Addison Oaks, or have you ever been to an aero tow event? So some of you have not, so that's cool. Okay. Let's start out with this. Everybody probably recognizes this, even if you guys haven't flown much. Most guys think of these. This is an Olympic sailplane, classic, 1974 technology. We still build some like that. And the materials we use are better. And by the way, I'll make a pitch for materials. Modern materials, like the carbon fiber that you're going to see in Ned's airplane and other things, are really a wonderful boon to these old airplanes because we can substitute for the original spars and the wood and all that crap. Some really modern materials with some real decent strength, and the planes are just better all around that way. So anyway, this is more like today. Because one of our guys, Ted Flack, with his 4-meter all-carbon molded altitude limited electric sailplane. And I'll talk about that, what altitude limited electric sailplane is. So my first advisory note is the best sailplanes aren't always the most complex or expensive. And that applies to all RC models, but sailplanes in particular, I think. I'll start out with just some of the smaller ones. We'll go smaller to larger, sort of. So here's a Dreamflight Alua, which is a molded foam airplane, 36-inch span, pop together. You can hand launch it or you can fly it on a slope, cute and shit. I wish I had one here this morning, but I didn't bring it along. And this is also, and John, by the way, works with these people at Dreamflight, so we can get any of their stuff. There's also a little slope plane, 36-inch, called the Weasel, and there's a small sloper, which is this, which is called the Ahi. And this is what I mean by, foam and carbon fiber and lightweight, around $100, maybe a few bucks more. Put a simple radio in it and go fly it, and it's a terrific little airplane. There's in Sterling Heights, there's a park called Joseph Dahlia Park, and it's got one of those big berms around the soccer field that's made out of garbage, I suppose. But it's a nice hill, and when the wind is out of the west, you can take this and toss it off that and float around for 20 minutes, at a shot. And it's just really a nice airplane. Yeah, like yeah, the air's coming up the hillside, and you just toss it off the hillside. I usually try to get out there. Rich and I have been out there doing this kind of stuff. It works really well with discus gliders too. And by the way, if anybody wants to see these things, of course, they're feelable and you can pass it around if you like.
The name of the park again?
What's that?
The name of the park again?
It's Joseph Dahlia. I think it's spelled H-A-L-I-A or something like that. So anyway, they also make like a mini discus launch glider, a 47-inch glider that looks like this, the little valve. And in the same sort of class, moving up to about 60-inch span, FMS, who John also deals with, can get you this. This is like a sort of scale Minimoa. It's 1.5 meter, and that's 60-inch, and comes with a motor and all that kind of stuff, and it's a sweet little airplane. I don't know anybody that's got one of these, but I've seen them at Toledo and stuff like that. And we also have the classic Radian, which John has up there. He's got a night Radian in the box with the one with the Horizon body. The night Radian comes with lights on it so that you can fly it at night if you like, and it's pretty cool. But most guys just ignore that and fly it like a Radian. Radian's 2 meter, and when the Radians first came out a few years ago, they were, how long have they been out? They've been that long? Yeah. But they were kind of a groundbreaker because they made super simple gliders available to lots of people, and they work well. They're interesting too. There was a thing on RC groups, one of the guys called the Park Zone people and said, is that like a secret airfoil? Turns out the airfoil was designed in the 1920s. It's a Göttingen 357, and it was first analyzed with the old the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, the really NACA, and it was analyzed in 1936. Modern airfoil, right? But it worked. They used it because free flighters used to use it. So anyway, now you can get big with foam airplanes. This guy is 3 meters. It's truly a sloper. It's pretty hard, from what I've read, for guys to thermal this machine. You gotta have a hell of a thermal. You gotta have California thermals to thermal this guy. Otherwise, it's a hell of a slope machine. It's got an electric motor on it, and you can fly up and fly anywhere. And John can get you one of these. I think they're about $450, but they're 120 inch span and they're kick-ass. You haven't had any call.
I assembled one here for a gentleman from Gary Orion from up here. We put it together. That's massive. It's a beast. Pretty cool.
You heard back any?
No, it's ready to go. You hasn't flown yet.
Yeah, cool. So anyway, and we're going to talk about this guy. This is the guy here right here. And let me show you a couple of scenes from the build. There's a scene from the build. Ned, where the hell are you? Oh, hiding out is Ned Burdick right behind us here. Raise your hand again so they can see you. Ned built this guy, and this is a couple of shots from his shop. And any comments to make about it?
You know, these new planes that are, you know, designed on a CAD system, they're designed to go together very quickly. And as you look at that airplane, there's 10,000 ribs on it. There's 2 half ribs between every rib. And other than just clearancing the holes, you know, like I said, the design is just, you literally could build this plane in 2 days. You know, that doesn't probably include finished work, but at least just in terms of construction, a day on the fuselage, pod, and tail feathers, and a day on the wings, and you can have, like I said, at least constructed. And it's covered with ultra coat light, which I've become a real fan of. In fact, that's my covering of preference now for sailplanes, and it's just a great little flyer.
It's beautiful work. You know, even though it's all laser cut and all that good shit, take a look at it carefully. It's nice job.
Oh, thank you.
Very cool. There are others. This is one that John can't get. This is called a Tory, but I showed it because it's a 2 meter. It would be a competitive sized airplane to this, and it's marketed by Tower. But one of our club members, Larry Markey, got it and was totally dissatisfied with everything except the basic structure. So he turned that job right there into this by stripping off the original covering, redesigning the tail group so it was lighter, and doing his own covering job. And if you can see that he just did beautiful work on that in terms of covering and all that. And he added ailerons to it because the airplane doesn't come with ailerons. He wanted ailerons. So anyway, I guess my point is
flaps. Yeah, it has ailerons. It's
oh, I'm sorry. It comes with ailerons. He added flaps.
Yeah,
that's right. So I guess the point is making a pitch for John. If you can't buy it from John, at least come in here and totally rebuild it with stuff you get here. Did I say that right? Is that what? He asks. He always tells me to say this shit. Anyway, so all right. Here's the plane we have here. This is a Q12. And Rich, can you say a couple of words about this guy? This is a.
Well, it's become popular in our club for events that we hold contest we hold called Tail, 2 meters, restricted at 2 meters. And it's a nice line, it comes from, I get it from Piper Flight in England, so it's a great source for sailplanes. And it's a nice flying airplane, and Barney and I have been trying to program everything into it. It's a nice little kit.
It's unusual in that it's not a standard foam that anybody in the rest of the industry is using at the moment. It's kind of a foam that's, it's somewhat resilient, and it's covered, and if you get a chance later, just come over and feel the wings. But super smooth and super accurate wings, and very lightweight. There's some carbon reinforcement obviously put right in the thing, so beautifully done.
So it's a nice example of a 2 meter type airplane with ailerons and flaps.
In other words, it's a full house machine. It'll do everything you want from a sailplane point of view. For a long time in the hobby, they had different sizes. We'll talk about size in a minute or two, but 2 meter got overwhelmed by larger airplanes as guys were building more and more. The larger airplanes tend to fly better, at least they're easier to see. And there's been a return in the recent years to 2 meters because they're handy as hell. And there are a lot of electric systems and stuff that'll work with them. And I think we're going to see, we are seeing a resurgence of 2 meter sized aircraft. In fact, this one contest, I'll explain that in a minute, called Tails, is kind of written around a 2 meter airplane. Okay, the best sailplanes aren't always the largest either, but like I said, it helps. If you've got size issues, big is good. It also aerodynamically is more efficient.
Yeah.
It's also easier to see, but sometimes a big plane, a 3 or a 4 meter plane, is just a general pain in the ass.
Barney, maybe the other thing to mention too is that the weights on these planes have come way down. The yellow jacket that you see sitting there, for a wooden built airplane is 16 ounces ready to fly. That's with a battery. And the real big planes that you see up there, 4 meter sailplane weighing 40 ounces ready to fly. So they're just incredibly light. And so their ability to penetrate compared to the older planes is significant. And their wind range is much better than they used to be too.
Yeah, and the other thing that's changed, just to go along with that, is like the airfoil. I mentioned that the Radiant did pretty well with the 1918 airfoil, or whatever it was originally. But the modern airfoils, they fly faster. They give you better lift-to-drag ratios, and you can modulate them. You can camber them so that you slow them way down or speed them way up. The lightweight that Ned talked about helps with that. This is a Snipe discus launch. Discus launch is an interesting, to me, this is my favorite form of flying. This guy here is a discus launch glider. If you haven't seen one, it's kind of cool. I just left it on so I can show you that it's got all the typical stuff. It's got flapper-ons and all that kind of good stuff. It's another nice thing, since it doesn't have a motor and it doesn't demand much from the servos, it'll sit there half the day and just stay on so you can demonstrate it. Anyway, but I love these things. I'm no good at discus because I can't launch like the guys in their 30s. I'm a little altitude challenged, but it's real fun because every so often in any contest, Mother Nature smiles on you and kills the other guys, and it's well worth it. So, that's really fun. Oh, yeah, I didn't explain. And for those of you guys who don't know, it's got a throwing pegs on the end of the wing, like that. And so what you do is you run with it, you do a 360-degree turn. Run is more like a trot. And you hike it.
And then fall down.
Yeah, well, you learn not to fall on your butt. And when you do, you just say, oh, I slipped on the ground. So, okay, so that's discus launch. And I hate to tell you this, but truthfully, if somebody told me I could only fly one type of airplane the rest of my life, that'd be it. Nothing else comes close. To me.
Why is that?
Just because it's fun. I can carry it in my car, I can hop out of the car, I can throw it, and the things fly. Hard to describe how well they fly, but You can do low-level aerobatic stuff at 10 and 15 and 20 feet. You can bring it in, slow it down, and catch it, and everybody goes, ooh, wow.
They-
But-
But it's like, describe it like fly fishing. is the analogy.
That's what we were.
Why don't you tell them that, the analogy of fly fishing,
They-
because you don't catch it thermally every
You don't
time.
get, yeah, you don't, that's good. Fishermen, they go out and, you know, they never catch fish, but when they do, that makes up for all the times they never catch them.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like that with thermal.
You keep trying, you keep, launching 2 or 3 launches, and all of a sudden you get a little bit of lift, and away you go.
That's a good analogy, because like fly fishing, you can put a lot of effort into small details, and the details pay off.
Yeah, they signal lift really well, and you'd be surprised how sometimes you'd be 25 feet off the ground and catch a thermal with one of those. A bigger plane
Yeah.
would just sink to the ground at that height, and it's really one of the most exciting things you can be a part of when you're flying is you catch a low-level thermal and climb up, spec it out from there. But they do signal lift the best, and they're really one of the best ways to learn how to fly in thermals.
And good launchers get how high, Tom? How high would a good launcher get?
Probably around 200 feet.
Yeah, so it's surprising how high they get.
Tom launches to 200 feet.
Yeah.
Tom is you're a good launcher.
Okay.
Yeah, don't try to deny it.
Yeah. We've seen you.
At any rate,
I'm a little below.
that particular one's called a snipe. Yep. And actually, it was designed by the guy in this picture here. The guy with the doofy hat is a guy named Joe Wirtz, who's a national, world champion glider pilot. Been a champion for many years. And speaking of champion glider pilots, there's Richard McCleary.
Oh my.
That's the same damn jacket. Don't you remember buying those?
Well, I'm sure.
This was out. There's a landfill near Brighton that we've flown off of. I don't even know if we can get on it this year, but that was last year. Yeah. That airplane up there too, which is called that thing, it's a 2-meter. No, that's a Consuego, or that latest one.
Oh, the one on top, yeah. The one in
He's
the
flying a
picture.
Calypso. Those are
Yeah.
both,
It's Kendo.
molded foam, what is it? Consendo?
Consendo.
Yeah, something like that. At any
Consendo.
rate, it's
I
a
don't-
2-meter,
Yeah.
foam airplane that John can get you, and I think they're like about $150.
I think it's a
And
1.5. Yeah.
They're supposed to be that one is supposed to be a really good flyer. Richard wasn't super happy with,
The Calypso was better as a sloper than it is better as a sloper than it is as a thermal airplane, so that's where it gets most of its heat. But I've had my eye on that Consendo for a while, it would be a good sloper too, I would think. It's a nicely priced one.
120.
Same as like one of these micros.
Right. Okay, and then there are bigger ones. They manufactured the Mystique for a few years in 2 forms. This is a 100-inch or 120-inch glider, and they had a spoiler-on version or a spoiler version, which is this, or a rudder elevator spoiler version. And they also had one with flaps and ailerons. They're not making the one with flaps and ailerons anymore, but they make this guy. And it's our club president up there, Roger, and he's
That's a
flown a lot
club
of them.
field.
What's
Mentioned
that?
Mentioned that's the club field.
That is our club field out there.
Yeah, which is not far away.
Yep. Here's another picture of the field. This is bigger 3-meter moldy. This is one of our good buddies, Jackie Fred. He gave a talk like this last year here. And they actually used these slides too, so. I had to be out of town seeing grandkids, so there's that. And there is Aerotow. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that, but in this case, you use a plane like this as a tow. Now this is a large tow plane. There are smaller ones, but you use this to tow up gliders of various forms. You can see some of them sitting out here at the field down in Saline. And some of them are scale, they're large gliders. Most of them are scale planes in this view. And they're towed up just like you would a real airplane. And everybody has a blast, it's really fun, and it's a part of soaring that I thought I'd tell you about. And if you ever get a chance to see it, there are two events primarily in this area. One's in Saline, usually in the spring, late spring, and one's in Frankenmuth in the late fall. Fun. So today, this is what we have. Basically, we have bungee launched airplanes. Not so much winch anymore. Actually, our club isn't using the winches anymore. We have discus launch, which I told you about, electric launch, slope, and aero tail. And if you get interested in sailplanes, you kind of got to think, what do you really want to do? Do you want to fly sailplanes for fun? And that's how most of us start. Or are you competitive? And I've never been competitive worth a shit, so I tend to be a fly for fun guy, but whatever you like to do is whatever. Okay, guys. Let's talk about how to fly. Thermals, how to see them, how to fly them. So pay attention. There's a quiz in the morning. Okay. I thought you'd like this. I saw this face and I thought, I gotta use that for something. What was it? That birds know how to do it. All right. Okay. So thermals are the one thing that we sort of live on with Soaring. So everybody knows that. And this is a typical sketch of a thermal. Some of you may have seen this one before. It's on Wikipedia. And it talks about a thermal as if it's a column of rising air that ends up in sort of a donut-shaped toroid at the top. And the fact of the matter is, that doesn't happen very often. It does on a large scale, much more than it does on a small scale. And we're talking under 1,000 feet. They don't form like this. So, two common misconceptions, and you hear them from, you don't hear it so much anymore. I think soaring guys have gotten much more sophisticated about what's really going on. One of those common misconceptions is that they are toroidal, and the second one is that thermals rotate counterclockwise in this hemisphere. You'll always hear that from people that know that, except it isn't true. Thermals are pretty well balanced. They rotate clockwise, counterclockwise, they flop around, they do everything. Now, really large scale storms like hurricanes and stuff like that, they definitely go counterclockwise in this hemisphere. Okay, so let's go back and say this typical partly correct concept is that air warms on the surface, starts to go up in almost like a tube-like shape, starts to form a thing, but in fact, what actually happens is they start to form like a bubble in the surface, or a half a bubble, just from the warming air. And then they start to grow as the warm air rises. And then as time goes on, they form sort of a bubble, which starts to drift downwind. As a matter of fact, it always goes down. Which is an interesting thing I want to talk about too, and I haven't got a slide for it, but I'll tell you about that in a minute. But the end result is that over time, a typical flying field will generate bubbles. The bubbles will go up as separate entities and move higher. And eventually, a lot of times they'll coalesce and they'll make larger patterns of rising air. If you're lucky, you can find where that's going on. One of the interesting things that happens is as the bubble grows, and I've shown it a little tree line here, pretty bad tree line, but I was lazy about the drawing. Anyway, as the thing drifts towards the trees will start to rattle as the thermal gets near it. And as the thermal moves just beyond it, cooler air coming in behind will start to make all the leaves chatter. So it ties with their sailplanes, like with their discus jobs. You felt a little warm air, all of a sudden it's starting to move a little, you see the trees rattling, you punch her out and try to get up over those trees, because you know it's telling you there's warm air lifting. Here's another thing, talking. There's some guys that have talked about the river of air. I think it was Bob Dodson used to write about that.
Paul Buzzard's Soaring Handbook.
Yeah, right.
Thornburg.
Basically, what the thought is that when you're flying, whether you're flying Bauer or whatever you're flying, we're always in a block of air that's moving along, and we standing still on the ground feel that as wind. Keep in mind that once the airplane's in the air, it does not know anything about that wind. It's in a quiet block of air, it happens to be moving. Now, there are inertial effects. If it's moving at 30 miles an hour and your airplane's in it, it'll act in a turn like it's, if you try to turn too sharp or stuff, it is moving. Its mass is rolling at 30 miles an hour. But what my point is that what you feel on the ground, and you get this in, especially in a discus launch, you'll say, oh my gosh, there's a breeze coming in. You launch that airplane, and if you just let it sit by itself, it'll just quietly go around as if everything's calm, usually. It'll just drift the moving air. That's kind of interesting. So, somebody made the comment once, there is no wind once you're off the ground, and there isn't. But there is turbulence. Because, for example, a block of air moving along, coming over a line of trees, the air downwind of those, the air as it's coming across and going over there, turbulence and it rolls. And that's an important effect. And you guys, anybody who's flown power sees that, like at Pontiac or any of the places. You get too close to that tree line and there's a breeze, planes start bouncing all over hell. So anyway. Oh, and the other thing is, warm air, as air forms bubbles, or these kind of bubbles, when it goes up, it's really quite localized. And because it is warm, it moves up relatively quickly compared with the block of air. So the total amount of air going up and going down has to be the same, so that if you think about it, there's always a little bit on a day when there are good strong thermals, there's always in the surrounding air, which is usually a larger area, there's a slow movement of air down. So if you're not if you're not going up, you're going down. You know, so there's no neutral air. Anyway, I don't know if any of you have seen this before, but this is a computer simulation of a large-scale area over the open ocean. And it's a simulation that shows what real thermals look like, and they look just awful. They're strange shapes, they're lumpy, they're discontinuous, they roll this way and that. Like one guy described them, they look like, for all the world, like a bunch of dog turds in the sky. I couldn't believe it. So I leave you with that. So when people say, oh, I know where the thermal is exactly, well, you probably got a hint, but you probably don't have any idea what its real shape is. So, I wanted to give you this. There was this guy, did some cartoons of the growth and breakout of a thermal, that effect that I was talking about. And they're cute. So, let me show you this. Can you guys see this little guy all right? So, he's sitting there and he feels a breeze. He's your typical modeler, maybe a discus guy or maybe a thermal guy. He feels a breeze coming down the field. He doesn't quite realize, but might suspect that there's some warming air upwind of him. So there's a bubble forming. Well, as the bubble starts to form and the warm air starts to go up, it partly blocks that general flow. And he notices it's calm. So all of a sudden, it's starting to get calm, and he says, oh, hey, something's coming. We do this often at Addison Oaks, and we're frequently wrong. Anyway, the longer that goes on and the air stays calm, the bigger you can suspect that thing is that's upwind of you yet, although you know it's drifting towards you. That is to say, from the upwind direction. All of a sudden, poof, you'll start to hear perhaps leaves rattle in the trees just down from you, and you'll suddenly feel cold air. That tells you that the cold air, some of it is going below that thing now. It's broken off, and it's starting to go up like one of those bubbles. When that happens to you, like this little guy, you can jump up and down and say, we got it, we know where it is. That's as basic and oversimplified view of thermals as I can give you.
Hey, Barney,
Yes,
when you get into one of those bubbles,
yes.
how is there, is it just chance on how long it's gonna last? Or?
Yeah, the only thing you have control over is sort of how well you can stay with it. You never know whether it's going to become a bigger thing that goes up, or whether it's just a smaller one that's kind of, what would you call them? Sustaining. You don't know whether they're sustaining.
So the bubble stays in a certain area, or does it?
No, it moves.
It moves, so
That
you can
bubble,
stay with
that,
it then.
yeah, that bubble keeps moving with that block of air. You know, and that's why they keep breaking off. You know, like you'll have classic, they always describe like a parking lot. But get relatively hot air fairly quick in the sunlight. and it'll get a lot of small bubbles coming off. Whereas maybe a big field, the growth of thermals might be quite a bit less. So, yeah.
Part of the fun is chasing the ball.
Part of the fun is chasing the bubbles. Speaking of which, we're gonna talk about free flight guys. We've got a couple of free flight guys, and I won't name them, Richard. But free flight guys do this kind of stuff. You'll see free flight guys with these poles, and what they've got is a temperature and wind recorder. And I mentioned that the bubbles will come off kind of regularly. And out in open areas like this shot was taken, they can measure these things, and they can see surface temperature, which is in the blue of the ground, and the temperature of the air above it, and they always match. And the things will come at regular intervals, and they'll time the intervals. So they'll say, okay, the last thing that came through was 10 minutes, the next one's 10 minutes later, the next one's 10 minutes later. I think we got a pattern here. So they'll hold back in their launches so that they can get the rising air, right?
Right.
Sometimes half wreck a contest doing it.
Yeah. Well, you wait for the temperatures. You'll see the temperature rise, and that'll go on for a little bit. Then you'll feel a breeze, a fill, and then that's the time to go. And it's a crapshoot. You don't know for sure. It's a crapshoot. In free flight, it's all based on duration. So once you launch, there's no control. Rather, the model is trimmed to fly in a circular pattern. So you hope that you put it into a thermal, and you get a duration of 3 minutes for the flight.
Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't.
Right. So yeah.
So, typical thermal indicators. This is just a list. Surfaces that are likely to warm fast, they'll give you a clue that you want to be in those kind of surfaces. And that can be just a mowed field that happens to be, thinly cut compared with a thick field next to it. Seeds, dust, or fuzz going up in the air, you always, if you spot any of that stuff happening, and sometimes you do on a sunny day, that's pretty cool. Hawks, vultures, or any kinds of birds that seem to be, especially small birds flitting over an open field, mean that there are insects going up. They're hunting insects over those things. And you can use ribbon poles if possible, we do that. The most important of these is watch experienced pilots. If you go out someplace where there's a contest or you're playing around, you want to follow the good guys. Identify real fast, where's the Joe Wirtz in this group, and follow him. Because they can read it really well. And I threw this in just because, like somebody said, but what do you usually see when you get out to a field? And truthfully, a lot of times, not much. You're saying you're looking for all these signs. Where are the birds? Where are the bugs? Where's this? Where's that? Truthfully, you don't often, you see them sometimes and you say, wow, I got it. But you don't always. And the best detector is probably your own sailplane, so you watch it. And I'll give you a couple of quick slides on that. Your sailplane. Now I'm assuming in this, as I talk about this, that your sailplane has gotten it to some altitude, some small altitude, and it's cruising along. You got it relatively steady. And as you're going along, this view shows, let's suppose that plane is going away from you. That plane starts to tip off to one side. What that's telling you is that the air, if you're tipping off to the right, the air to the left is probably rising. Because what that thermal or that rising air tends to do, the faster it's going up, the more it's going to try to tend to tip your glider out a little bit. The movement on one side is a little different than the other, and the general airflow tends to be out from a thermal. So anyway, you watch it. If she starts to swing to the left, try to roll your turn into the right, and see what you find. And what will happen to you if you've done it right, and you turn in that way, is the tail will start to come up, which is an interesting effect. As you head into rising air, the tail of your airplane starts to go up. As you go into drooping air or soft air, the tail of your airplane will tend to come down, which fakes out people that are beginning. Beginners usually see the plane coasting along and they say, oh, it looks like it's pointing up, it must be going up. It's probably sagging down. That's an odd effect, but it's a real effect. So anyway, That's all this thing is showing. If it's going away from you or coming towards you, watch the way it tends to tip. Leave it, and that requires that you kind of leave the glider alone, which is a problem for beginning glider pilots. They tend to want to fly the plane all the time. You got to get the plane to the point where it's trimmed well and it's pretty much on its own, and you can let it go. I remember one of our officers, Jackie Afret, said to me, "Barn, keep your hands off the sticks." You know, Lon's laughing because he's just been through this stuff. So anyway, if you're flying across your line of sight, like I said, as you're going along, your plane's coasting along and it's doing okay, and then all of a sudden you'll see this funny little behavior where it'll seem to, its ass end will come up. You've just crossed into lift. So what you want to do then, if it's a day when the lift isn't real strong, I mean, if you cross into it and all of a sudden she starts to go like an elevator, stay with it. But if you go over it and there's a little bump there, come back on around, see if you can find it again, and see if you can tighten into it. And if you can do that, it's surprising how often, with a little bit of experience, you can hit those things, and you'll find yourself looking like the cartoon guy.
Hey, Barney?
Yes.
I have a question. When you're turning, a lot of these planes have rudder and ailerons.
Right.
Most of glider lifts are rudder only, but with ailerons, when you're in a thermal situation, are you predominantly rudder or aileron or both?
If it's a light effect, I try to stick with rudder.
Stick with what?
Stick with rudder if it's a light, a small
No
effect.
ailerons.
Yeah, aileron's a little more draggy than rudder. A lot of times rudder, if you've got your plane trimmed right, can kick your butt around a little quicker than with the aileron. The turn is low, you have to tip the plane and then use a little elevator to move it. Now I have a problem with that because I don't do that naturally. I tend to fly a little faster, and that's a mistake I make. We've got guys like one of our pilots, John Ferguson, is just, Johnny's magnificent. He'll get in there and he'll just schmooze that rudder, and he'll come around, and everybody says, "How does he stay up all the time?" You know, Tom's laughing. Tom's good at it too. So you got to kind of teach yourself. But that's a good question. Now, if it's a strong thermal, you know, if you're coming along and you get whopped, you know, pour the coal to it. Just dive into that fellow. But if it's a real soft effect, try to use rudder.
So it's kind of like speed predominantly.
Exactly.
Ailerons with speed.
Ailerons with speed and so on.
If you can keep your wings level as much as possible when you're turning, you know.
That's right.
And so it's just a matter of how wide your turns are, you can live with, you know. If you feel like I always feel like I have to bank into my turns because I need to core the thermal tighter.
Yeah.
So I'm using coordinated turns with rudder and aileron together. But if you know, especially if it's really strong, you know, I'll try to stay in the center of that core more. But if it's really weak, then I'll try to rudder turn and just make big turns. And you'll tell when you're going around the circle, okay, it's going up on that side, but it's going down on that side. So, you know, you need to open up your turn a little more, or
You're the best straight man I've ever had. I got a slide on that right after.
Yeah.
What Tom was talking about partly is this. Let's suppose you pass a thermal, and there's your, bear with me with the illustration, but there's your ball of your rising air. You come by and you try to turn into it, and it doesn't work. Then pull a trick if you want. If you think it's strong enough, swing around, loop around, and come into it straight. In other words, some guys will be flying at a contest, they'll start to go this way, and they'll try to climb into it with rudder, sometimes even the aileron. They can't get into it, so they just swoop around and come in. But what Tom was just talking about is a more subtle effect. A lot of times you're in something, or you think you are, and you're turning, but you're on one side of the turn. You notice the plane seems to be going up, and on the other side down. So what they always tell you is, like he was saying, open up on the side of the turn where you're getting higher. You'll gradually start to shift your position into that. And I drew the ball here lumpy because I swear to God, there is no such thing as a typical thermal. They're lumpy. So on and so forth. But that's the effect he was talking about.
I mean, I always like to turn tighter because I'm not exactly, if once I know that I'm in it, then I'll try to keep turning as tight as possible. if I'm constantly in it. But ideally, if it's, you know, if it's there, then try to stay in it as much as possible. So that's why I'm always turning tighter. But ideally, you should be try to keep your wings level, which lends itself to being wider turns with the rudder. And,
Right.
you know.
And then there's this. If you just can't find it, get the hell out of that area. I was at a contest once where there was a guy named Larry Jolly, who's an old timer, and for some reason he cut off and went like a rocket, and I didn't quite know why he was doing that. And I asked him when he got down, I said, "Where were you going?" And he says, "That was down air up there. Your plane was doing the hoop-de-hoop," and he says, "So was mine." And he says, "It's down there. You got to get out of there." And I said, "How do you decide which way to go?" And he says, "It doesn't make any difference. Just turn one way or the other. Make a shot. Go for it. But get the hell out of there." So get out of Tampa, baby. So, and so there are little tricks like that. And I think I'm going to put together more slides like this to take some of the stuff that Tom said and some of the other guys said and add a few more to that. So anyway, some final thoughts. Start simple and practice. Don't get distracted by stuff like technical stuff or too many things. Get a decent glider, stick with it, fly it, and practice. And sailplanes look easy, but they aren't, so practice. Big isn't necessarily better, so practice. Money won't buy you love or get you a win either. Did I mention practice? This is our club. This is the Greater Detroit Soaring and Hiking Society. A picture recently. Tommy, I think you took this picture.
Yeah. Show my throat. You got the throat face ones in there?
I didn't do that to you. Oh, a couple of really good references, just as I kind of wrap up. There's a book by Martin Simons on model aircraft aerodynamics, and if you hear guys pouring forth all kind of knowledge about aerodynamics and you think they might be full of shit, get this book. Because this guy knows his stuff. It's not a new book, it's been around for a lot of years, but it's been updated recently. And it's absolutely first-rated for any modeler who likes to fly. And the other one is just a fun book. It's called The Old Buzzard Soaring Book. Yeah, Lon likes it. That's a great book because Dave Thornburg, who designed The Bird of Time years ago, wrote this book about a guy traveling on the desert who picks up an injured buzzard. And the buzzard proceeds to talk to him about how you really should fly. So that's it. So anyway, so long and thanks for all the time.
Good job, Barney.
Any questions?
Well, one thing to mention maybe, what's the plane you always recommend if someone wants to come out and fly?
Oh, the Radius.
Yeah, that's a nice entry airplane. Yeah.
Oh, maybe
Which
I
one is
didn't
that?
say that. Yeah, what's that?
Which plane is that?
It's the Radius. The one up there. There's
Okay.
one right on the top, the horizon. It's called a night Radian, but it's actually the Radian. That's the one that I was joking about. It's 1918 airplane. That's a remarkable airplane.
It's a great entry level.
It's a great entry-level
It's
airplane.
the one-
It does everything pretty well,
Yeah.
and it'll handle rough air, and if you smack it up,
What's the one out the front window?
that's a great big version of it, but I'm not even sure they make it.
I don't think they do.
Is that?
The Super Radiant or
The
whatever.
Super
XL.
Radian, is that still named the
Oh, the
Radian?
Pro?
XL or something.
Yeah, the Radiant Pro is an Aeron flat version.
The one in the front window is the Radiant XL.